talk about some of the development that he is doing at Kiwi Tech. Gurvinder is currently Chief Technology Officer of Kiwi Tech, a mobile app development and ebook distribution company focused on mobile and web platforms, which he founded in 2009. He's co-founder of Aptara, one of the world's largest publishing services companies. Gurvinder also started a company in India prior to Aptara, a desktop publishing firm called Calligraphics. He's a graduate of Jamia Millia Islamia University in New Delhi, where he earned an engineering degree in electronics and communications. Gurvinder is a frequent speaker at technology-related conferences and was selected one of the top 10 CTOs in the Washington, D.C. area in 2008.
Thanks, Jim. It's going to be hard to follow after the energetic talk from James. He's always very good with what he's trying to do. What I'm going to do is basically share with you some data points, things I keep collecting, and I tend to do that with other people we work with. There's always changes going on in terms of different devices, platforms, and there's something new happening. And then I'll switch to actually showing you, how people are dealing with, from a mobile perspective, with different ideas and what kind of challenges, are facing on the way. Just talking about ebooks in general, we've been talking about it since 2000. It's been a lot of up and down what ebooks can do and where they are, and there'll be a lot of excitement, and then it'll die down again. But it looks like now they're there to stay. With all the convergence happening, you see a lot of stuff moving towards the digital platform. And then, there are a few points that you look at in terms of, how various other things have grown in terms of adoption rate, whether you talk about web itself, even desktop. It's amazing to see, the iPhone and iPad, the tablets, which are not there that long, how fast is their adoption rate. And I'll show you some graphs to see how they're outpacing everything else which has happened till date. And then around that, you see a lot of other development happening to support in terms of Wi-Fi, GPS, or other technologies which will help making easy to consume content on the mobile devices. And then you hear numbers, from people like Gartner or Forrester, app sales, and again, it's not like 10 years out. It's 2013, talking about 29 billion. And mobile commerce overall, 120 billion by 2015. Huge numbers. So you can see there's so much convergence happening in terms of what people are trying to do on these mobile platforms. We've already seen, what iPad did. Apple's projection was they will sell 3 million in the first 9 months in 2010. Even analysts said, maybe it'll be 4 or 5 million. They sold 15 million in the first 9 months. So it's amazing. We saw earlier part iPhone was the greatest thing, but you see how fast iPad adoption happened. It's just amazing. And it kind of seems like, there was a lot of discussion of mobile app, ebooks and everything from a mobile platform perspective. But since iPad came out, it has changed the dynamics of the whole publishing specifically in terms of people looking for solutions, how to scale it, what different things you can do, because sheer form factor makes a big difference. This was very interesting. I saw this graph and I was just looking at it. There's a lot of talk about iOS, obviously, Android. If you just compare the numbers, from Q4 2009 to Q4 2010, it's amazing how much growth has happened. Obviously, when you talk about Android, you're not talking about a single handset. It's multiple handsets. But the sheer growth in terms of growing from 3 million in Q4 2009 to 33 million, it's huge. And it's almost double, close to double of what iPhone is doing in the same time period of time. So you can't ignore that market space. Till date, everything has been based on iOS, because that's the main platform where you see in terms of monetization or different things. Now, we also talk about closed environment. Google is an open environment, which I think a lot of things we heard James talk about. I think as the Android platform picks up, it will allow people to do a lot more in an open environment than what we used to in an iOS platform. And again, this just to see like how there's a lot of platforms there, and you can see like how the engagement is there, like the users. Obviously, there's also a difference between what people look for in Android is free versus paid on iOS. But again, just looking at the sheer numbers in terms of the install base, people who've been there around like Nokia, Symbian, or other phones which have been out there, the number of downloads what they get, it's nothing as compared to what people are doing on their Android or iOS handset. It's basically making the people much more comfortable dealing with whether it's paid or free in terms of what they want to do or what kind of content they want, which kind of helps, from a publisher perspective, like, people are used to it, and then if you get it in the right format and right kind of content, they like to use it on the mobile platform. This is interesting, the ebooks, if you look at, many people look at iTunes and there are different categories, right? Games always, in any platform, are always the first one to increase, but ebooks have actually outnumbered the games. Now, there's an interesting theory behind it. If you look at a majority of the ebooks apps are actually single books which have been put in some kind of a reader. If I can compare it in terms of download and sales, it's probably much less than games. But the sheer number, which tells you at least people are trying to use a mobile platform to consume. And also interesting to see as you look at patterns between an iPhone and iPad, for instance. iPhone is still primarily a phone device. So people, it's nice to have that you can have apps on it, but tend to look at for free more content, maybe 99 cents. But as you go to iPad, people buy it for apps. So if I'm not going to buy apps, well, I'm going to have an iPad and invest $500 or plus on it. And we have actually done some tests where we've done apps separately on both and just watch user behavior. And the the exact same feature, everything same, and actually a simple book as well. iPad had probably 10 to 15 times more downloads as compared to an iPhone. So we just again showing you some numbers in terms of the sheer growth in terms of the ebooks adoption and how it's actually affecting everything. It's making a big difference. This was interesting, like seeing how people are developing in 2010 what platform they use. You can see iOS was very high, but Android is picking up very fast. We also saw in the last 6 months, the majority of apps now we're launching are both iOS and Android in parallel. And before 6 months, nobody was actually asking about Droid or any other platform. If you look at now 2011, and it shows you like how it's changing between, if we differentiate between iPhone and iPad and Android, and iPad is actually, and it's very interesting, it looks much more than iPhone. Again, I think more from a publishing perspective. And Android is picking up more than that. And it's interesting, I think, as you've probably heard a few of the things which came out in the last couple of weeks, with BlackBerry announcing that on Playbook they will allow Android apps. Amazon launching App Store, which is basically the same Android apps. And now Nook is also going to allow running Android apps. So you have multiple channels, which is not only Google Marketplace, which was, all the app stores are very, the discoverability that huge issue everywhere, but Google Marketplace was not really easy to browse through and find something what you're looking for. And Amazon is good at that, they've been doing it very well, so they're launching them, so that makes you like, you can go to multiple places. Now you're going to have Barnes & Nobles as well. So that tells you like, how publishers are using that, all the stuff is happening in terms of their planning and the platforms they're looking at to build their content. And again, it ties into like, which platform they're building and how they're seeing the revenue coming in from 2010 to 2011. So it ties in with, as you see, increase happening into, other different areas. This I found really interesting. The personal computers have been around for ages now, it seems like. And the smartphones or tablets are like, we're talking about 3 to 4 years. And they're saying 2013, they would have, outpaced the install base of a PC, which is just amazing. If you look at the adoption rate, how fast is actually taking over our lives and what we do. You get on Excel, most of the people are actually using their iPad and don't have the computer any longer. But they can do everything on an iPad. Why carry a big computer or a laptop? So very interesting in 2009, 13, what they're projecting here. I mean, there's a lot of talk between, in earlier sessions about Amazon, Apple, Google in terms of what they are trying to do. And amazing how they're forcing, everybody to be locked in, as James was talking about, into their own platform. And there's a lot of struggle in terms of, the percentage, what you're sharing with them versus, what publishers give you. But they want to be the big gorilla in terms of the publishing specifically. Interestingly also, like, the EPUB, which was supposed to be the go-to thing, but it's actually losing its charm a little bit because ultimately it's nothing but a poor facsimile of the printed book. It's E, but there's nothing E in it really. There's no interactivity. Yeah, you can search, you can do some other stuff, but there's no interactivity. So certainly now you hear more about enhanced EPUBs, which is nothing but EPUB, but actually you are trying to add interactive. But we're still kind of dependent on various devices and the readers, like what iBooks allows you or what Amazon allows you to do in terms of adding interactivity, whether it's video, audio, or it's some low level of assessments that you can add into the content. But I think it's a good way to at least have a low-cost way to have your content more interactive on a mobile or any kind of reader device. Whereas if you compare apps to it, apps are more from giving the user a more custom experience. They can do what they want, and I'll show you some examples of where. But the critical factor is when I'm linking back to what I was saying in terms of people do spend more money on the iPad, but it's linked to an interactivity that they can actually use the device. If an app doesn't use the touch control and it's just a list of with this thing and then you're just tapping on it, the users don't really get excited about it. So the interactivity is the key part of it. And we get a lot of apps to be done if you do it right. It also depends on the type of content. You actually the payback period is very quick. But it again depends on the target market and everything what you're looking at. So this is one of the apps we did, and I'll show you that. I'm gonna just play the video because I think that shows it very well. In terms of, it's still one of its kind, I will say, on the App Store.
All at the same time, a new reading experience has arrived. Introducing the amplified edition of Ken Follett's The Pillars of the Earth. It's not just a digital version of the book. It's a whole new way of interacting with the story. To learn more about the characters in the novel, just touch the screen in the character tree. Tap into carefully chosen contextual clips from the Star's original series as you read.
The church has rules and hierarchy. I obey my father. Kneel before me. Now.
Go behind the scenes with author Ken Follett.
I imagined it. I wrote it, but I guess I never thought I would see it. And this is really how it would be.
This edition of Pillars will be updated with new clips from the Star's original series over the course of 8 weeks. Explore the art of...
So as you can see, highly interactive, and all it was taking was basically a book which was published in the 80s to connecting with a TV series which was being launched by Starz last year. And it became #1 in 24 hours. People saw something totally different. And I think there's so much other stuff happening, but I think that's where what I meant with interactivity, unless you provide that. Now, this book is available in Amazon for $9.99. Penguins upsold this app, which has a ton of video content, for $12.99. So for same content, same book, they were actually able to get more revenue just because they were giving the user a very high level of interactivity, a lot of behind-the-scenes material, almost 3 hours of video embedded into it. Let's talk about some challenges before I switch back to, maybe let me at least show you some stuff that might come back to it. So I'm going to go to Pillars though. I'm going to talk about, just show you some stuff in terms of, how to really go about planning your content needs in terms of what you want to do. And many times what we're finding is it's actually, there was I was talking about the DSM for ABB. When I started have a discussion with Melissa, and what is your need? What are the user looking for? And the key thing was, it should be very simple. It should not be complicated. And all we want is people should be able to get to the same thing what Pam said, get to the disorder very quickly. So that's always the key, in terms of how you design an app. Actually, a lot of people don't think about it, but 60% is actually the UI and graphic. It's only 40% is the program. Once you do the UI right, then it's very easy to kind of figure out what you're trying to do here. So you click on it, you can get to, and you see the disorder directly. And I can go this way, or I can actually go through classifications and do that way. So you're giving user multiple ways to get to the content. I was surprised they decided to price it at the same as their desk reference, which was $47. And I felt bad, and I convinced them to do an app. I was what are they going to do now? And the thing launched right before the iPad came out, and it still sells. I mean, it sells like 4 or 5 copies every day. It's a go-to place for content like this. So people want to have it on the mobile platform because it helps. So it's very key in terms of how you look at the content and decide. Because, interactivity is good, but in this case, it was not really needed. It was more accessibility and getting to the right places very quickly. Now, a lot of talk, I think I would say probably last 3 months, I've seen a lot of pickup in terms of journals. We've been talking, that's where we started in Actara. That was my first content segment in STM as the first customer was working on journals. And I saw there's multiple ways to get the journals on this kind of make it more interactive in the sense what you're going to do. So, but interestingly, as we work with various societies and publishers, everybody's trying to take a very different approach. In this case, they wanted it should look like a journal. That was a key for them. It should not look like a database or something. So you can see the volumes issue, you can see the articles in press, and it's very traditional in terms of what you're doing. And I can go to a full text and choose a different, not black color because you can embed the links properly. And you can all the other features in terms of, you can you can save articles, you can search, you can do all those things are already there. But the look and feel should be very journal-like. And some societies, to them, that's very, very critical. Now I'll show you another example. So it looks like a more of a database approach. So you have, of course, news feed, and you have list of various series in this case. And again, it doesn't look like it. It has done slightly different because they felt that's better. When the content still comes out, it looks like it. But this more looks like a database approach where you have a list of articles, and that's what you're searching all the time. You're not really going by issue. So it's again very good to know, what is your, when you're targeting your user base, what do they want? Are they more married to the look and feel of the journal, but in a digital format, or they're looking for a more database approach and go away from issues completely? So as articles are being published, that's what they get. And you can do some cool things like, you can have like another app we're doing where we actually allowing the users to add their own keywords. So as the articles come in, they get to see the articles which are applied to those specific keywords. So they don't have to kind of search through the list of all the articles. They can go to those specific articles directly. So in this case, there's another thing which is, when I said app, are more custom. So in this app, I can actually decide as a user where the app should open every time. So I can decide whether it goes to news feeds, it goes to a specific series. I can decide that. I can also decide what news feeds I want to see. The one which are provided by the app, and I can add my own news feeds in it, and I can decide how often it refreshes. So a lot of this is where the user, the custom experience comes in. And similarly for browse, what I want to see, and then search. Similarly, what journals I should search. Should it by default search all of them, which will again depend on the performance. So if you give users choices, that helps them okay, great, this is a more custom experience, and they will rather go for a mobile experience rather than, using something which is just putting a browser on the iPad. That anybody can do, If you want to give a user a different experience, that's where then they go and spend the money, and look for it. This is a good example, so if you ever look at this book, it's just plain black and white book. It's language learning. And language learning should be more interactive, So if you look at the book, it's black and white and has a back of the book DVD, which has all the audio in it. And when I was discussing with Random House, it's how do we make it more interactive? If initially their thing was, they converted actually to an EPUB and then embedded all the audio files throughout the book. And you look at it, it doesn't look interactive at all. It's not interactive. Yeah, you can play the audio, but I can't do anything else. From language learning perspective, I want to test myself. I've done something. So how do you make it more interactive? So we took the same content. There's no editorial, but we took the content, just presented it in a different format. So that becomes key. So in this case, interactivity is very important. So using cards to kind of flip through all the terms, you can play in audio, or I can tap on to see the English right there, or I have flexibility to see 4 cards at a time. Just different ways of taking the same content which was already there, and unique way like of putting a dialogue practice. So people are used to texting, so using that approach to kind of show the content, and I can again tap on anytime and see the English version of that text. And then on top of that, build some games. Take the same content. It's so easy because everything is already in your database. So all you're doing is, in this case, we use a kind of physics engine to so I can click on one word and see, if they match, they pop. So suddenly now what you've done is you've taken the content which you had, but provided a very interactive environment to the user. So they would much rather use this to learn French rather than actually go back to the book or just an EPUB which they can download. Another thing is, I'm seeing the trend happening. It's a good example of this particular one. Now you're spending a lot of money on doing this app, building the games and all the stuff on it. Now, how do you use that effectively so that I don't have to spend that money again on a second book download? So in this case, Random House had 7 different languages. There's a whole living language series. So a lot of people are thinking of making buckets or templates. It's very same. I've been in the publishing where we used to have one-off journals. Each journal have its own style sheet, and eventually publishers started consolidating, and you'll have, from 50 styles to down to 2 or 3 styles. It's nothing, it's the same thing, where we are actually putting the journals or books in a certain bucket, so you create templates, and that way you spend whatever, $15,000 to $20,000 on your first app, but the subsequent apps, you're actually down to $2,000 to $3,000 because you don't change the features. Yeah, you may change colors, branding, and everything, and in this case, the same thing happened. We did one, and then 7 other languages were just a database change because it's a content change. It's not the functionality change. Everything else looks like the same, and we can reuse all the features and everything. I'll show you this. This is kind of very, very cool. We presented this to under reviews. So again, normally we're used to looking at a list of articles, the way I just showed you. So this is a very different concept where I have now plotted the articles around the globe using longitude latitude information and on different layers. So I can actually switch layers from here in terms of, okay, I'm taking the clouds off, so I'm showing all the oceanography, and so there are multiple layers basically, and I can through that connect to the same, see the article, and if I want to read about it, I can click on it and get the business contract. So it's again, it's the same thing, but it provides the user a very different interface. So people like it that I'm able to actually touch control, have a different interactive environment. Ultimately, you get to the same content, but it's like how you do it basically. So that's the key part, I think, in terms of deciding what you're doing and how you provide it. I'll use one more example again. It was good, like Pam was talking about a lot of stuff which I thought I could show now. So this is an app on dermatology. Again, you saw the website. So as a user, how do I find out what skin disease I have? So in this case, just giving them options of ticking off a few things, and you're going through various options, what color it is, what shape it is, what pattern it is, and you're going, and then you're giving them a choice of like, okay, these are one of these 4 diseases. I want to blow up the images, but it's just a more interactive, touch control way of actually telling them, so there's a database of 400 diseases. How do you get down to the right disease you're looking for? So the key component is, I think, the UI and the design. You need to really sit down and see for your content what works best. And then from there you can actually plan in terms of what should be doing. Coming back to the challenges. So the biggest issue is the discoverability. I think we all talk about it. There are 350,000 apps just on iTunes Store. Android is touching close to 130,000. So how do you make your app stand out? How will somebody find it? So that continues to be, I think all these people are trying to make it, Apple especially making a big effort in terms of removing the clutter, as I say, but it's an issue. You should not take the marketing very lightly. Marketing is very important, whether you use social networking or other channels. But again, for the same discoverability issue, you've got to work on marketing so that people can actually find your app, and there could be multiple ways of doing it. Other part is the scalability. Like, okay, one app was huge success. Now what do you do? Like that example was very good. The Penguin, the Pillars of the Earth. It was very huge success for Penguin. And they internally everybody said, oh, good, we'll do that for every book because it made them a lot of money. But A, where do you find the content that can, I mean, all books do not have that kind of media content every day. And the other thing is like, can you spend that kind of money on every book? So that's where the template thing comes in. I think it's just picking up a lot, especially seeing in medical space where your target user base have the ability to pay for the content. So if you can, it's exactly thinking like how we always thought about in production processes, you're actually making things in a template form and then reflowing content and then planning really ahead in terms of using XML workflows or ways to, but scalability and production costs are, I think, the immediate things which everybody's looking at. Platform devices, you saw all the charts I showed you. I mean, it's amazing how things are happening. And the tablets are just about to hit the market with HP and BlackBerry and all these other things, How do you decide what devices I should target on? And the numbers that are there, so it's not easy. And again, even from a developer perspective, it's difficult because it's different technologies. You're talking about Objective-C for iOS to Java for Android. So there's components you can reuse, but then there's device limitations and what we do. So it's a challenge. How do we decide what target market, what devices we should do? And then again, as I mentioned, enhanced content is it's not there for every book. So how do you actually add that enhancement so that it works for all of them? And the biggest part of it, as James was talking about, is subscription issues, especially the Apple's new rule policy where it's saying, if you're selling something through a subscription model in the web, you've got to have the same subscription model through the app as well, which means they'll take 30% cut off everything that you sell through that. Now, in journals world, how do you get away with that? I mean, you can't. I mean, it's a huge challenge from a publisher perspective. I mean, there are ways, we're doing. For Wiley, we did an app, we actually was able to talk to Apple and then we figured out a way out that actually they allowed it to be free and no in-app purchase in it. But I think they're getting more and more tough, like, things like this, how do they allow or not allow. We're working on the Lancet right now, and there's a huge challenge going on with Lancet, like, will they allow the app without subscription or not? Because for Lancet, that's an absolutely no-no. They cannot have subscription into the app. They want to continue the subscription through the web model. And I think about this, like, a lot of things come back to like the whole 80-20 rule. How do we go about planning? What should we be doing? Should we be looking at a solution for everything, all the products that we have, or focus on like the 20% which we think can really make money? So I think going again the slide James had, like, it's good to experiment. Unless you experiment, you will not know whether your user, your target user market, or your product has that mobile market or not. So please experiment. If you experiment to get a lot of data, then you can decide whether 80-20 rule works for you or is 100%. I think that's something you need to decide what works for your content. I think we've already given my background, but thank you. Any questions?
Can you tell us a little more about the problems of that Apple's subscription model has introduced, and how did you say some publisher actually has overcome it?
What they're saying basically is that if you have a subscription model, which is web-based, you got to allow users to have the same subscription model through the app as well. Now, most of the subscription model I've seen through web are very cumbersome. So they're not set up very. So it takes user quite a few clicks to actually finally get a subscription because you fill a lot of data. Whereas in case of app, it's actually literally one click. You want to get a subscription, you say yes, and it happens. So Apple's thinking is like user will more do through the app rather than do from outside. The solution which I've worked with Wiley and I'm working in Lancet is that right on the onset we actually have a login. So we don't actually allow users to get any content free or not free, unless they have some kind of a either registered user or a subscribers. So forcing basically only people who have already access, they will be a login. So Apple's early thinking was like if you provide free content, so it shows people like it is free, but actually it's not free. You have to subscribe, go to the web, subscribe, and then come back out. So that's one way I think I've been thinking like Apple allowed us to do one of for Wiley the same way, And that could be another way of a lot of other customers thinking. Another solution is, which we are again doing for some other societies, is initially not give full text. And let's all these things get figured out. So only provide access to the free part, just the abstracts. And if people can use that, to create like a list of articles they want to go back and view on their laptops or whatever, and they have access to the computer and they can use it. It at least puts you on the mobile platform rather than trying to fight that out with Apple today. Okay, thank you.